thing up. That's what I always tell new podcasters. Unfortunately, then I get all these harassment complaints, and it's like, no, I mean have a secondary recorder. Oh no,
that's on you. You interpret it how you want to interpret it. I know what I mean.
See, that's what I'm saying. Sometimes we choose to make our own prep. No, anyway. Awesome. Hey, everybody out there who's with us, happy Batman Day, happy Batman month, happy Batman year. If you celebrate, I don't know how you celebrate. Get your Batman tree up, get your Batman decorations outside, put your Batman cosplay on, or whatever it is that you want to cosplay as. Maybe Equilibrium. That's what I should talk about next year. Anyway.
Yes.
So it points to anybody who knows who Equilibrium is. There we go. So this wondrous Batman Day, I am joined by Seed himself, Darryl Mansel, who is joining me from all your various projects, man. You're the creator and Lord of all things over at the Paprika Reviews on the podcast verse, and then also Paprika, the Facebook group as well. I mentioned it a lot on here, but you can tell people what it is.
Yeah, Paprika it started out as just a way for people to come together in a community to talk about their love of pop culture and whether a form that looks like, whether it's TV or movies or comic books or anime or gaming or whatever it is, in the safest, most warming and welcoming environment possible. I hope that we've succeeded in doing that, and letting people just nerd about what they love. I am a dead believer that there is a story out there for everyone. So if we talk about all the stories over all the mediums, maybe you'll find the one that was for you.
That's a good way to put it. I hadn't heard you put it that way before, but that's really good. I think that definitely reflects in Paprika, but definitely the safety element too, as well as the warm element. But I like that because it's one of the, and I'll say probably maybe the only place I know where I can go in and say, I saw a thing, I want to see a thing, whatever genre, whatever fandom, I'm going to go and I'll just search through Paprika. I'll probably already find a thread on it. If not, I can start one and say, hey, everybody, what about this? Season 2 of this. And there's a place for people to talk about things there. And the toxicity that is not there. It is staggering how it's not there, if that makes sense. If anybody's been in other fandom groups, toxicity is one of those things that we get used to, dodging and everything. And y'all, in fact, even just lately, there was somebody who got booted for being like really, super negative. And so,
man, it was the weirdest thing because we booted him before, and we still have no idea how he got back in. Like, we went through all the admin logs, and none of the admin let this guy in. It's like he always had like a secret burner that's just been hanging out for who knows how long.
That's crazy. Weird, yeah, but he started taking shots at people and doing all that. Yeah, exactly. Just kind of gatekeeping, kind of like racist stuff too. It was just nasty. And I was like, what is this doing here? And then it was gone. You know what I mean? So, that's the things, you guys don't put up with that. And I appreciate that as well, because I've been in those groups where I report and it's like, so anyway, really so that's cool. Yeah, exactly. So, well, what are we talking about today? We're talking about, Batman White Knight. For anybody out there who is not familiar, for anyone who's familiar, for anyone at all, that encompasses pretty much, if you are familiar with Batman White Knight, or if you're not, that's most of the population. You fall into one of those two categories. Yeah. And then there's the ones who wrote it and illustrated it. They deserve their own category,
their own echelon.
This is one that let's see. Oh, I didn't write it down before. It's Sean Murphy. Is that the writer?
Sean Gordon Murphy.
Yes, and Matt Hollingsworth.
I got it digitally. I don't have it physically. I was about to turn around and look at the bookshelf, but
okay. Matt Hollingsworth is the colorist. Sean Murphy is the writer and artist. Yeah, there we go. So I got the colorist there for some reason. He got first billing too. So, and this is it's funny because I had talked to a few people that I was going to do this, and people like, that's my favorite Batman thing, or it's well known amongst, and it establishes some interesting, I would say, I don't know if we want to say interesting thing for anybody who's not super into comics, or even if you are, there's arcs and there's different storylines and there's different canon. Is this canon? Is that canon? And Batman for me is a bit of a tricky one because you get a lot of cross canons here and there that over here Alfred's dead, and it's post Alfred's passing. Over here Alfred's alive. Over here we got this Robin currently that, you know what I mean? There is revisiting going back, but you have kind of a wonky through line. It seems like it just depends on what the artists and writers decide to go with when they take the reins, right?
Yeah, I mean, when you have a guy that's been around for 80 plus years now, all that stuff starts getting real murky when that writer comes in and I've got the fresh new idea. Well, that fresh new idea kind of conflicts with what they did back in 1983 with Batman over here. And that's when you start getting a little bit confused with things. And that is one of, I think, the number one things that turns off people who don't read comics into getting into comics, especially the big two superhero ones, is I don't know where to start. I'm not trying to read 80 years worth of comic books or whatever the case may be. And I always tell those people, don't even worry about it. You'll learn and you'll pick it up as you go. You find something that sounds interesting, just hop in and read it and enjoy it for what it is.
Yeah, I'll say that, I had that it's several years ago now, but as somebody who got back into it after a period, as a kid, and then had a period where I just wasn't up on it for a while. And I had that exact same kind of thing. Like, okay, where do I go? What do I do? What's going on? And but I found it's exactly the way you just said, even if people don't believe it at first, because I was wondering, would I really catch this? And think about this. Anybody with kids, how many Pokemon do your kids know by age 6? Our brains are capable of bringing in information.
They really are. And also something that we have the advantage of now is the internet. So if you want to just go hop on Reddit and people will tell you, oh, if you're looking to get into Batman, you can start here or here or here or here, read this one arc or just read this one story and you'll still be, get a measure of satisfaction out of it. So, and it's been so helpful of people giving, especially Reddit, people giving other people advice on, oh, you read this, then you'll like this. I didn't like it because of this, that, and the third. Oh, well, I liked it because of this, that, and the third. Those are that's the kind of stuff that we like to try to bring to Babrand.
Yeah.
But yeah, the internet has been great at it. For every character you can think of, someone out there has been like, hey, here's where you start.
Here's a list. Here's this. I gotta dig into that list you put together of the Jonathan Hickman Avengers series. I was like, oh no, when I was looking at that, I'm like, that's daunting, man. You went through the whole run of Hickman and all these different, but you were kind enough to share a chart about it too, so it's very helpful. People, look out there or just grab something and read it, or do both, obviously.
Yeah,
but
there you go. As a guy with Hickman Avengers tattoos, I will always tell people exactly where they need to go and how they need to read that story.
Yeah. So with this one, I will say just one of the things I really do like about Batman, and even though I love some of the Batman movies, we talked about Matt Reeves' The Batman, I think last year. We talked about 3 Jokers the year before for Batman on this podcast, but some elements of 3 Jokers kind of comes up in here too. But anyway, even though I really love the movies, there's a couple of things the movies don't really capture. They really struggle with for some reason, they always struggle with showing a mid-career Batman, somebody who's he's been doing it for years. He's got history. And in this case, in this comic, I mean, they mention a couple times decades. They say, oh, we should have arrested him 20 years ago. So he's been around for a minute at this point, right? And a lot of the great stories in the comics come from that. Yes, exactly. Yeah, he knows what he's doing, and he's been doing it long enough that there's maybe some issues that have formed over time. And for some reason, they always go year 1, year 2 for movies. Year 1 to year 2. Anyway, I feel like they don't really they haven't delved into the big screen for mid-career Batman. I don't really know why. Maybe it's because they just want to make a bunch of them.
I think it's they want to get a young guy. You can keep him under contract for 3-4 movies. I think again, much like I said, every writer comes in with their take on Batman. You get screenwriters and directors that are like, I got my origin story take that I want to throw on screen. I think Michael Keaton is probably your best like mid-year, and then you got Affleck on the end of like your old grizzled Batman.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. They don't really go well. And one thing that I like about the stories in the comics too and this one is very rich with this, is there is so much more to Batman than just my parents got killed in an alley. Like that is the motivator in most, and I actually respected that Matt Reeves we didn't have to see a real flashback to Crime Alley and mention his parents,
Mm-hmm.
but in a whole different way, which actually mentioned his parents in a way that's similar to this, where it's like, oh, there's some kind of seedy history with Thomas Wayne, and kind of digging into the complications of being in a family that is unable to not be corrupted completely, even if it's a
Right.
non-corrupt family primarily, if that makes sense. So I always said before the Batman came out, I said, even though I love Batman Begins, we need a moratorium of like 10 or 20 years on just no more scenes of Crime Alley flashbacks of coming down the alley and the pearls that break on the ground and the rose that's laying, whatever, and the kiss from the rose on the grave. And so, although put that song in, that's fine. But no, but do you know what I mean? I like, there's so much richness to Batman's emotional life and so many complicated things that happen during being Batman that actually drive the character much more than the original motivator that made him Batman, right?
Yeah. I mean, I get why a 10-year-old or however old he is, whatever old they want to make him when he gets killed, or when his parents get killed, a 10-year-old boy who wants to vow vengeance on the world, and that kind of maturing into, I just don't want this to happen to anybody else, and then that kind of maturing into escalation is what Gordon talked about at the end of Batman Begins, right? As escalation is, there's that theatricality of Batman, therefore prompts the seedier elements to bring their own theatricality into it, and it grows beyond him. And how does that weigh on a person who's does it for, in the case of White Knight, decades on end? And where does Bruce stop and Batman begin at this point?
Yeah. I will say one thing with the art as we get into the story, but one thing with the art that I thought was very interesting is there's a couple different times, and they do this with Joker too, where you'll see a shadow of Bruce Wayne and the shadow will have the cowl ears, or you'll see the shadow of the Joker when he's this Jack Napier, and it has his frizzy hair, like if he was Joker in the shadow, right? There's a couple, and there's a lot of that kind of work that's being like, yeah, exactly, who is who at this point. I mean, it's been kind of long trodden ground to say that, Bruce Wayne is the mask and Batman's his real identity in some ways, like as far as who he is deep down. And so this really takes it to that sort of nth level. The question you bring up is Batman helping or is Batman hurting? And in this case, directly hurting. So let's get into that. I mean, we open up here with, it's really interesting to me. The opening is the Joker, and this whole, it's volume 1 of White Knight, right, is what we're talking about here. So,
Right.
yeah. So there's another, it goes on past there, of course, but so it attacks some of the tropey things of Batman, I should say. There's a little Easter eggs in here for Batman fans. There's a part near the end where there's a bunch of Batmobiles and you can see the old 1960s one driving or whatever. So, but the Joker is riding a scooter and he's taking Batman and Nightwing and Batgirl on this chase throughout Gotham, and he's like, "Hey, let's do our greatest hits. Chase me over this rooftop. Hey, let's do this. This is." And he's like, "This is the show, and you and I are co-stars." Is very much the vibe that we're getting here, right?
Yeah, it's the trip down memory lane of, I'm going to establish up front all the stuff about Batman and Joker before I give you something a little bit different. What makes no sense is how a Batmobile can't catch up to like the scooter that Joker's on.
This is a very souped up scooter.
Souped up scooter, man. I'm like, it's time for the Batmobile maintenance, man. You guys got to put a little bit more juice into that thing.
Well, the sticker's on the back. You never look at the license plate and realize that it needs inspection, until it's been like 3 months over. So, and Alfred's been incapacitated right now. Yeah, Alfred's been busy being frozen, as we find out. But anyway, yeah, no, that's a good point. So we get there. So the Joker gets into this. We're going to do a loose follow through here, but feel free to jump around as we talk about it here.
Right.
And I guess I could say spoilers. If anybody's worried about that, go read it, hit pause. Go read it, come back, hit unpause, and then, do what you want after that. So right away, though, Joker gets into this factory and they're like, what is this place? It's full of pills of some kind. And he essentially he starts what is going to be the recurring theme throughout here, where he starts lecturing Batman. He starts telling him like, you are afraid because you know that you and I are, we get into this like love story sort of thing where he's like sort of in, some platonic love with Batman, right? He's basically like, you complete me, I complete you. We can't exist without each other. You're the same as me. You don't like that. And ends up triggering what is a very disturbing set of panels where right out the gate, we're seeing Batman essentially engage in what would be, pretty severe police brutality.
Yeah.
He's even videoed doing it by someone with a phone, right?
Right. Yeah. It's, I talked about this story with a couple of people over the last couple of days. And like you said up front, a lot of people are like, this is one of my favorite Batman stories. But there's also another contingent that's like, this story is not a Batman story at all. I think in order for this to work, you have to have a lot of out of character things that Batman does in order to propel the plot forward. I mean, he's known for being a fairly cold, logical, these are the facts, and then I will investigate these facts, and I will derive my conclusions, and then we'll move from there. This is the most unhinged we have ever seen Bruce Wayne Batman. And they kind of try to explain it away with what's going on with Alfred and all that, this, that, and the third. But I don't think for this story that Batman fully works. Let me rephrase that. For this story, the Batman does work.
Yes.
For Batman canon, this isn't Batman. This Batman doesn't work.
And I think that's where, I kind of look at this. I'll be interested to get your thoughts on this too, because I don't know if this one really establishes. In fact, I feel like it goes against canon in a couple different ways. And so it's almost like a what if to me. It's almost like here's a what if, kind of like Old Man Logan or Marvel What If or whatever, where it's kind of like, what if Batman was subject to like essentially burnout and rage, right? As what we're seeing, here's a Batman who at some point rage has gotten the better of him, and it's interesting because Dick Grayson at one point in the story accuses him of saying, well, it's a good thing you're always right, and he is right about whatever it is. And I've heard a long time ago this commentator, I can't even remember who it was now, who said that Batman's real superpower, people will say he doesn't have a superpower, or they'll say superpower is being rich, or his superpower is being super prepared, and that's fine, but this is an interesting point, that his real superpower is he's correct. And when he's beating the hell out of somebody, it's the right person. That he's not just like beating up purse snatchers who don't really deserve it. And that he's behind the scenes also maybe helping people. Harley Quinn, he helps her at some point in some stories in the animated series and stuff. So I think you're right. I think this is like unique to me. Like, okay, let's see what would happen if Batman was a little more morally fuzzy than maybe we would. An already morally fuzzy character in some ways, but in the way of like letting his rage take over. And so I'm with you. When I read that, I have to kind of suspend. For me, I have to go in that what if mindset to enjoy it. That's how I am about it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm the same way. I mean, it's kind of weird saying suspend your disbelief on a comic book story where you already have to suspend disbelief. But in this case, you have to just pretty much throw disbelief to reckless abandon. Another thing that, especially in like that first issue or two, if you've kind of followed Twitter over the years, comic book Twitter, and people have a lot of Batman takes, right? Why doesn't Batman just? It seems like Murphy took some of those ideas and scraped them together and threw them in the story. From Joker's perspective, we know what Bruce Wayne should have done, or what Batman should have done, or here's why Batman's bad for God. I've read
Joker
all
is
this on Twitter
the
before.
crummy comic book Twitter guy. Yeah.
It's exactly what it is.
I think I saw you roast a guy just the other day about this, right? Somebody said that, and you were like, "Wow, what a fresh take." And someone was like, "Why didn't Bruce Wayne just soup up the police department?" And you're like, "I've never heard this before."
Yeah, and it's come on, and that's what lets you know, like, I'm not gonna be that guy, like, oh, who doesn't read Batman comics, but if you spend any amount of time reading the comics, you know that Bruce Wayne does do a lot of the why doesn't Batman just. Uh,
Yeah.
but if you only watch the movies, then that's kind of one of the elements that they cut out in order for more Batman action.
Right. Although they do. I mean, it's funny because if you really are watching in this latest Matt Reeves movie, he goes, "Oh, I should be." Right. I mean, they do address it, and they address it as they weave through. And I find most of the storylines are either realization that he could be doing more and paying more attention to Gotham as Bruce Wayne, than he is, or they highlight how he already is, but he's always finding that it gets corrupted and stolen. And even the Dark Knight, he says, but Alfred says, why don't you no, if I give this to the police, someone corrupt will weaponize it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, it plays upon that kind of reality with Gotham. Also, it's always fun to go down the road of like, boy, that'd be a fun story. Let's go ahead and read a comic about Bruce Wayne, the regular philanthropist.
Yeah, that's a Bruce Wayne at the charity ball. That's going to be a great 22 issue, 22 page issue.
And it also ties in with something that I think is interesting. I think that people sometimes make this weird mistake, especially nowadays where we overanalyze everything, to say that a character should act like I think they should act all the time, or that they should even do what is right. And it's like, well, Batman's a messed up individual. I mean, he's a no matter what iteration, he's tremendously flawed. And it's like, I think his priorities are off here. It's like, yeah, you think? I mean, yeah, I think
the man dresses up
he's
as
not
a
dealing
giant
with
bat.
Exactly. It's like, get that kid into some therapy after his parents are shot, and he's not Batman, right? So I think we have to go, and that's one of the reasons why this particular experiment, I enjoy this comic as a thought experiment about this, because it does dig into like a human side of Batman that we couldn't really see without this level of vulnerability, without him having to admit. And as we're going to see, I think going into this, I'll say one of the things I find is that actually through line, even though he's wrong in some of his choices of how he's expressing it, he's not actually that wrong when it comes to it. So we'll get, and this is where we get into this first conflict, which is this real or not? Batman is part of just beating the Joker's ass. He shoves pill after pill down his throat because the Joker's like, "Oh, why don't you medicate me?" And he's like, "I'll medicate you," and
medicate you with justice.
And so he stuffs his mouth full of pills, and this is where it gets disturbing. Where even Batgirl is kind of like, "Stop
Calm
it,
down, dude. Yeah.
knock it off," and everybody is a little freaked out. Commissioner Gordon's there. This is out of character. We're seeing this break. And as the Joker, so essentially Joker survives. Obviously, he always survives. And he wakes up in the hospital and he's cured. Like all of a sudden, he's got no and this what I should add is the Jack Napier Joker. There's different Joker iterations. There's some where he's no backstory, some where he's Jack Napier, somewhere
Arthur Fleck Joker. This one, I guess, is technically the Jack Nicholson Joker, because that is Jack Nicholson's name.
That's his name, right? Which is kind of more the gangster Joker. When you look at it, to say that there's the kind of gangster bank robber Joker, and that's kind of what we're presented here. Which gets into an interesting question, because as he is now acting normal like a person, he starts, he immediately starts researching, like, okay, he's really super smart, which he always was, but he was insane. And now he is not expressing himself in an insane way, supposedly. Right. And he starts filing legal things. And we find out that at least in this universe, this version of Joker has never been convicted of any real, he was convicted of bank robbery and he's been accused of a bunch of other stuff, but never really convicted. So this is right away. It's a whole, this is a what if. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Right.
Who is the prosecution using against this
Yeah.
guy? I don't understand.
This is after Harvey Dent went two-faced. There was nobody really up to snuff, you know.
I guess
Well,
so.
you
His
get one
fingerprints are
good
on the bomb. We just
prosecutor.
can't get him.
Yes, you get one good prosecutor who gets acid in his face. It's probably hard to for HR to recruit somebody.
Yeah, I don't think I'd take the job after that. That's all happened to that
Yeah,
guy.
yeah, exactly. It just takes one water pistol full of acid, and that's it. Um, so something for recruiters to be aware of out there. But yeah, so it's an interesting question that they have here. So and I think you're right. There's a bunch of plot contrivances they need to move this story forward. You can't have the Joker having been like committing serial murders on TV in this universe because otherwise that
Right.
wouldn't work. Right.
Yeah, and that's
But
something I forget who it is. Somebody in comics, one of the old guard is like, yeah, never let canon get in the way of a good story.
yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly, and that's the thing. Once again, this is another thing when people, with the MCU, people watch it and they say, "Oh no, they're doing all this wacky stuff." It's like, yeah, have you read comics? I mean, yeah, there's all kinds of stuff in it. Why is there multiverse? There's always been a multiverse. Just
Yeah.
chill out a little. I mean, whether or not you like what they do with it, but so here's the question we run into right away: is they're like, is he just faking it? And they
Mhm.
have some line in there about CAT scans and his brain seems healed or whatever, that seems a little spurious. But to say, that's the question. And he certainly, I don't know, get your thoughts on this. He seems to believe that he's cured because he talks about it when he's by himself or just with Harley, right?
He seems to think that he's healed. And that question only lingers for so long of is he or isn't he? If he is, it opens up the far juicier question of what does a healed Joker do? And that's
Yes.
pretty much what we get with this
Yes.
story. And it is an interesting way to approach Batman and Gotham and Gordon and all this kind of stuff.
And right away you get to where and little by little everybody starts to have doubts about whether or not he's still inherently evil, except for one person, of course. Bruce Wayne is still like, guys, come on. You can almost like, come on, what is going on here? Is everyone crazy? Everybody feels that way at first. I shouldn't say the public starts to get behind him, like, oh, he's this guy, he's cured. He sued the city and he got out of Arkham, and and now he's becoming this advocate. And he says this is where the name of the story comes from. He wants to be the White Knight as opposed to the Dark Knight. I'm out in the day, the light of day, and I'm fighting legally to get Batman, supposedly. And then everybody starts to go, well, little by little throughout the story, we see, we won't hit exact beat for beat here, but we see where everybody, except for Batman, and to a certain extent, Dick Grayson never really buys it. I feel like too, even though he does buy into some of his proposals.
Yeah, I think he buys into Joker's plans for the city. He doesn't buy into Joker being, this completely rehabilitated person. Everybody to the point. At any point, did you seriously think maybe Batman's wrong? Did that ever come into your equations while you were reading this?
Well, the first time I did read it, I was like, I will say this, not really. There was this part of me that's like, are they really going to have Batman? But then, of course, I will say, as we'll see, they do have Batman come to some realizations that I didn't really expect for them to go that hard into where he maybe is wrong about the way he's been conducting his business, right?
Yeah.
But was he wrong about the Joker? I didn't think so, and I think this is confirmed. The part where he's right, through line, he is correct, is that almost right away, the Joker takes up with Harley Quinn again, which is a very interesting, I've never seen this in any other Joker storyline, where he realizes that the Harley that he's been hanging out with for the last however many years is a replacement, that Harley left him, and that he just immediately sort of took out this other like kind of fractured soul person who he just treated her like Harley, and she started acting like that, and he forgot that she wasn't the original one. And now as Jack Napier, with his narcissism reduced somewhat, he doesn't remember a lot of these things apparently. And so the
Yeah.
real Harley comes in, the snubbed Harley goes off and becomes essentially the antagonist of the story eventually when she becomes the Neo Joker, which to get revenge on him for essentially not just dumping her, but becoming Jack instead of the Joker, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but he immediately, once they get going, he starts, let's say, cheating the system in a pretty, I mean, that's a pretty understatement of like, um, the thought occurred to me as I was reading it again. I was like, oh yeah, so he steals Mad Hatter's tech and he starts to mind control other villains to
Hmm.
get them to act up so that then he can save the day through his initiatives. And in this case, so he stops being like, I'm going to do this for chaos and crime to I'm going to do the same types of plans except for order and law and order and justification of like, I'm doing this for a good cause. But it's the same, to me, that's the same bent mindset. It's
Right.
twisted in that. I
Yeah.
know that was my, how about you? Did you ever think he was wrong, by the way? I didn't ask you back.
No, I don't think I did. I think I was with Batman. Like, so weird disclaimer when it comes to this particular comic. And you asked me to do White Knight, and I was like, okay, yeah, I've never read White Knight before. Let me hop on
Oh, this is your first.
Comixology.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't know. I hopped on Comixology, and there's like, you purchased this on like June 2016, and I was like, oh, I've already bought this. I had no idea. Let me download it to the old iPad. I downloaded it to the iPad. It opened up to the last page, and I was like, "Have I read this?" And mind blanked everything about it. So, like, starting from the beginning again, I was like, "Maybe I have read this." But then, like 60 pages later, I'm like, "No, I haven't read this." Like another 30 pages later, like, "I think I have read this." So I don't know. I'm it's
I do this with big volumes. Yeah. I mean, well, and sometimes you get the ones that you'll cross in your head. I mean, I do that sometimes with what's it called? Hush and Long Halloween. I find occasionally, especially the Long Halloween 2 that I barely remember. It's there's it's not
that
as
one
good.
right there.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, sometimes those, if it's been a while since I've read it, not so much Long Halloween, but anyway, I crossed some of those stories of like, wait, was that the Killing Joke or was it? Yeah, so I do that
Yes,
sometimes.
still have no idea if I've actually read this thing or not. But but I at this iteration, yeah, at no point did I actually buy into is Joker doing the right thing for the right reasons.
Right.
And they really hammer that point home at the end where Joker has been hammering Batman consistently of you break all the laws trying to do the right thing. And
Right.
Batman's talking to Harley at the end, like, how does he not realize he also broke the laws trying to do what he thought was the right thing?
And that's the thing. And you see this woven throughout. I think the thing that this story does that I think is the most interesting is it really puts together who is the Joker and who's Batman and what the difference is. And here are, because I think we see them oftentimes as at odds, antagonist, protagonist kind of thing. But at the same time, going back to the Dark Knight, there's this great line where Batman's interrogating the Joker and the Joker says, "Why are you talking like one of them?" He points to where normal human beings are on the other side of the wall. He's like, "We're freaks. They hate you just as much as me. They just need you right now."
Yep.
And this kind of takes that and runs with that in a way that I think that's actually the most interesting part. So the question is Jack Napier, is he doing this wrong for the right reasons, or is he still wrong for the wrong reasons? Is there because there's still a narcissistic pride, but then again, we can't say that Batman doesn't have a little of that either, right?
Oh yeah, Batman's definitely got the hugest ego of anybody in DC Comics. For years, there's always been the two sides of the same coin between Batman and Joker, and I think this one takes that point and just flogs it to the last possible extent. Like, okay, you have covered this ground expeditiously, sir. So we understand the tone or the message that you're trying to get across here. We get it.
I often think about I think it was a Cracked article that I read years ago or something like that, back when they were good, where they talked about the writer had mentioned Animal Farm and how Animal Farm was a metaphor. and it said it's a metaphor in the same way that if you wrote the word metaphor on a sledgehammer and hit someone in the face with so,
Yeah, real thinly veiled stuff Animal Farm is doing over there.
right, exactly. And one of the classics. So therefore, it doesn't mean it's bad.
Good point.
Yeah, this is real interesting how they start to bring this up to where we do find at some point we find out that Alfred is essentially dying, and that Victor Fries is helping Bruce to experiment with the freezing technology. He's kind of frozen Alfred, similar to how he froze his wife, and that they're trying to figure out a way to save both of them, right? And this is an interesting thing I think that we see that I'm glad they maintained even in this version of broken, ragey Batman. Is that Batman helps, right? He does, even his villains. This is a part where we see, because I always like to put it this way: Batman is a hero, but he's a criminal. So there's a part of his ego and his personality. He breaks the law. He's above the law in his mind, in a lot of ways. He can be outside the law. However you want to put it, there's something that he identifies with. This is why his best romantic interest is Catwoman, is because they're both, that sort of like, whatever, chaotic good for him, maybe chaotic neutral for her. I don't know.
Chaotic neutral, definitely.
Code it, right? But anyway, so it's interesting that he's helping Freeze, as he does in most other comics, right? He tries to help at least save his wife or keep her alive.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, you could look at it as like, Batman is being a good dude, but I also kind of suspect like Batman's one of the most pragmatic heroes we have, right? He knows that if they solve this riddle of Freeze's wife, Freeze has no reason to go to a life of villainy, and that's one less person he has to worry about. So, like, how much are you doing this for Freeze, and how much are you doing it just to free up your own schedule, and with one less person off the board?
And that's a really good point. It's funny because I've been doing these kind of for this month and stuff, even just to be a little goof as well. Well, I do it kind of to be goofy, but also to teach and share some principles of how people do diagnoses. I do these. I've been doing these little videos about diagnosing Batman videos, like doing an internship at Arkham Asylum. In fact, just recorded a video today with London Smith, the Jock Doc podcast, where he was playing the part of the Scarecrow, I should say. I was case staffing with the medical director.
Nice. Nice.
Anyway, it's just for fun. But the interesting thing is that because I put real, diagnostic criteria, how I would actually work with a patient or something if I was in that setting. And Victor Fries was the one that I was like, this guy could totally be rehabilitated.
Anybody?
Because he's probably one of the most rehabilitatable of the villains.
I mean, outside of Catwoman, who I think...
Well, that's true, but she's not really an Arkham resident, I don't think, usually.
Yeah, I don't think you ever see Catwoman in Arkham all that much. But yeah, Freeze really just wants his wife back, man. It's the simplest motivator out of any of them. And if he were to get that one very human want, then he's just another dude, just another member of Gotham. And they F off to wherever they go after that.
And I think, yeah, exactly. And I mean, I almost feel like Bruce Wayne would give him a new identity and move him to some tropical island somewhere. But maybe he'd want to be more warm after all that freezing. But
yeah,
so so this is
had dudes on there. He's like, hey, listen, this guy's earned his time on Themyscira, Wonder Woman. Just give him a little beachfront property and let him live his life out.
Well, and so and one of the other ways they maintain this part of Batman's personality is that there is a history which does reflect in the animated series and some other comics. And of course, the animated series is where Harley Quinn originated before she moved into comics. But is that he's been sort of watching out for her over the years here and there. And that he has an investment in the idea that she's not all bad, right? And sort of a thing. So and as we learn, and this is jumping forward a bit, but spoiler here, but Harley is the one who developed the medicine that is keeping Joker as Jack.
Yeah, I got a little bit of issue with that.
Yeah.
Because and then it turns to the question of, you were able to do this, why now? Like, for all these years that Joker's been Joker, why is it now you whip up this drug cocktail? And what other Batman villains could you have been helping this whole time?
Especially
With
when she worked at Arkham.
especially when you worked at Arkham of all places. Uh, but I mean, we also come to find out that it's not a 100% cure all, right? He kind of
It doesn't work in the long
works
run,
that.
right?
But
Yeah.
even as a temporary sanity, I'm sure for some of these might be some cold comfort or odd relief just to be able to clear the fog and take time to
Yeah.
reevaluate their stuff.
Well, even for the city, holy cow! If it could be like, let's time it, give them all this stuff for like a month or two, everybody'd be like, oh, you know.
Oh
But
yeah, I'm not getting my
yeah,
car flattened by Bane today. That's great.
yeah, exactly. Well, no, and I think that is it's an interesting thing because I think you could say, and maybe this is what they're doing in the story, not to make excuses for them, but I kind of feel like the Neo Joker Harley, they kind of have both sides of Harley's personality, the way that Harley is represented in different comic storylines. She's
Mhm.
either kind of almost approaching anti-hero, I guess in the animated series, totally, you know, so there's like an anti-hero vibe.
And
Um,
at this point in comics, Harley is almost a full anti-hero.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you see that, and I think that so that may match the main Harley in this. Whereas I think the Neo Joker Harley, maybe this is symbolic. Maybe this is where the canon sort of diverted in a way, but she's the Harley who kind of started out. She's just crazy and she likes to just kill and wants to be totally wild and who knows? I do know that, you know, there's been an evolution. I think that some of the thought process behind making Harley, first of all, a more multidimensional, interesting character, but also to kind of I think it was when like girls started identifying with Harley, like she's so cool, and it's like I think that's where some writers took it and said, well, she's going to be cool. She's not someone you want to idolize. The Joker's relationship with her, and once again, people in stories who are bad do bad things, so of course it's a toxic relationship, you know.
Yeah.
But to say let's have a version of Harley who matures past that and is, even if she's evil, she's independent, you know, not
Yeah, I
being
think
abused.
you can tie a direct line to Suicide Squad. Margot Robbie is Harley. The public becomes aware fully of who Harley is.
Mm-hmm.
Women, men, whoever glom onto that character. And I think it's a double whammy of, oh, we can use Margot's popularity to really push Harley. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe we should be um, a little bit more responsible with how we tell Harley stories.
Mm-hmm.
And that has led on to, you know, what we know today of
Yeah.
Harley Quinn.
Yeah. Yeah, and so you see that where and DC does a lot with anti-heroes, even like they will have redemption for grim dark characters even more, you know, than you see in over in Marvel, I think. Although they redeem. I don't know why. It's just different with Marvel. Even if the person is genocided, it's still different than as far as the grim darkness. I don't know how they get away with it, but
Yeah, if Winter Soldier is standing on the rooftop and people are cheering, I'm cheering. If Harley Quinn is standing on the rooftop and people are cheering, I'm going to be like, y'all know she killed like 25 people last week, right?
I know, isn't that interesting? Everybody wants to, you know, line up to kiss up to Loki, but you know, but
Mhm.
there's
I
this
think
double
that's Tom
standards too,
Hiddleston,
right?
man. That's Tom
This is,
Hiddleston.
yeah, exactly. This is the argument I get to though, and with people about Scarlet Witch, because they're like, well, they could never redeem her, and it's like they redeemed Loki. They could, you know,
Yeah, if
right?
you can redeem the guy who caused what's got to be billions in property damage, thousands of deaths all over New York City, opened the door for aliens to invade the planet, you can find redemption for pretty much anyone except
Yeah,
Thanos.
exactly. Right. Yes, there you go.
Yeah.
Um, and what if even tried to play with that? Anyway, but one of their episodes.
So many Thanos was right coffee mugs and T-shirts that came
Oh,
after that, and I was like, well, you know, modern world.
yes, exactly. People love the Empire. Those same people are like, the Empire wasn't that bad in Star Wars. Yeah. So there we go. If somebody is out there, I guess at me, that's fine. We can have it out. So speaking of redemption, you know, here is the Joker who, as Jack Napier, you get the level, like there's a sincerity, which I think is an interesting thing because compare with Batman, total sincerity. Compare it with Joker. You know, Jack and Joker, Jackie Joker's here. Um, the Joker's sincere, right? I mean, in his intentions, he's
Yeah,
totally
yeah.
sincere. It's just that he, is having a different play around with this. And so we see this coming to a head at some point. There's also, he's running for city council. I think he gets elected. And he pushes this idea. One of the main things that I thought was very interesting was the deputization of vigilantes, right? Where he brings in, what's his name? Duke, who's the leader of, what are they?
Duke.
What's the name of his crew? I can't remember, but he's basically an ex-cop turned vigilante in Gotham, right?
Right.
Yeah. And then Nightwing and Batgirl also get pulled into this proposal to say, okay, you don't have to give us your identities or anything, but we're going to take this. We find out that there's a Batman insurance fund of some kind that pays off for the damages and the injuries that people, which we later find out is funded by Wayne Enterprises, but secretly, right?
Sloppy, Bruce. That was sloppy work on his part.
Yeah, exactly.
Man.
You gotta get some shell corporations.
Shell
or
corp. Exactly.
I don't know if Lucius Fox is in this universe. It's him to be setting up.
If so, he's doing a horrible job and needs to be fired immediately. I find this idea of what I think they call the GTO or something like that. Or GCO or something like that. It's kind of like a somewhat smarter version of the Sokovia Accords or the Superhuman Registration Act.
Yeah,
like
talk about that.
Work with us, but the whole issue with the Superhuman Registration Act and Marvel Comics Civil War was, I don't want to give up my secret identity, right? And here Joker's like, keep your mask on. That's cool. We just want you to work inside the law. We don't care who you are, just work inside the law to our boundaries and our parameters, and you're all good to go. That, had they done that in Marvel, it would have been way less of a kickback and way less of an event. Obviously, way less of a story. But I thought that they took that seed of an idea and made a smarter version of it. Like, I wouldn't be surprised how many heroes would be like, yeah, okay, we'll try it your way as long as I get to keep my secrets.
And that's the thing. And it's very interesting. And this is where we do see an interesting side, is that as Jack Napier does want to keep this promise going throughout the whole thing, that he really does kind of try to keep the commitments he's made. Except, of course, for the ones that he doesn't tell people about, that he's lying when he's pulling the syndrome from the Incredibles, with here's a disaster. Now I'll try to clean it up. So,
when you're causing your own disasters on your own buildings, right. I mean, you can kind of get away with that, I guess.
Yeah. So you do see there is a hypocrisy in a thing, that everything that he's accusing Batman of, he's essentially doing himself, which kind of gets back into this thought of like, why doesn't Bruce Wayne blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, Gotham. And this is also where I'm a little forgiving of the whole Batman kind of raging and being burnt out thing. Is it's like, can you be in Gotham without being corrupted by the inherent corruption when you dive into it? You leave the system, which you apparently have to in order to fight the corruption of Gotham, but you can't help but be corrupt a little bit as well.
Yeah, I love Gotham City so much. Gotham City is a citywide sized hotel from Shining. That's what Gotham City is.
That's great.
It brings you in, and it will eventually just corrupt you morally in some kind of way. And
another Jack Nicholson, by the way, another Jack Nicholson villain.
Yeah. And I feel like there's a very, very, very small handful of people who Gotham City, despite its best intentions, will never manage to corrupt. I think Gordon will almost always be incorruptible. I think Harvey Bullock will probably always be incorruptible. Maybe Nightwing will always be incorruptible. And outside of that, I think there's a couple of times Batman's got a little too far. And maybe Batgirl. I mean, she is kind of some of the voice of reason throughout this. So yeah, I mean, she's a Gordon. So you would assume that.
Sure.
And I'm not sure. I don't think Jim knows that in this comic. I don't think he knows that.
I couldn't get the vibe of this one or not. I know that in some he does and some he doesn't.
Yeah, they kind of let that ambiguous here. But there's very few people that Gotham can't touch. And I think that's part of why I love it so much.
And it's also one of the things that's inherent to the sort of like lore and legend of Batman is that he has to weave through in order to do the way that he's chosen to do it. And also like going back to my idea of him being like a traumatized kind of like having his own issues, he believes he can weave in and out of this corruption. Right
Yeah.
now, interesting enough, now he doesn't sign up for this, by the way, and as it turns out, they eventually are trying to arrest him because he's still trying to do his thing, and from depending on the perspective, he would say they got in his way, they would say that he gets in their way, and there's a big bridge explosion and everything, and one little bridge explosion, and they get all mad, and so it's all about, and in this case, it's very interesting. They set up a super elaborate plan. And I think I only bought it because Batgirl and Dick Grayson are in it because they're trained by Batman, right? So they essentially out Batman, and they plan this whole thing with like an EMP and a bright light that blinds him, and Gordon in a more analog Batmobile running him off the road, and they're able to bring him down sort of the same way that Batman occasionally brings down Superman in other comics. I mean, it's basically like they had to pull out all the stops and make this
pull out all the
50-step
stops. And
Rubik Goldberg kind of like,
if I remember correctly, that is the Keaton mobile that Gordon is in.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
You see the Keaton one at one point. You see the Tumbler from the Dark Knight series. The one that he has in this one with the flames come out inside, which is one of the coolest Batman. And of course, you have the Adam West joint as well. And they were
yes, exactly. And that's really this fleet of cars, this fleet of Batmobiles, essentially that the GTO or whatever, this special vigilante squad has, Yeah. And is there anything more Gotham than deputized vigilantes? Come on, that's that's the Wild West right there, right? Kind of a thing of like get a posse, but. So then they arrest him, they get him in there, and essentially, the Neo Joker gets, out of control. She gets a freeze cannon, starts freezing half of Gotham. It's a nice thing in this world also, in most of them, that this is a weird freeze ray that you can melt and everybody's fine afterwards. It's always interesting. That way you can get away showing half the city frozen, and it's not like, oh my gosh, they're all dead. It's like, no, they're going to be all right.
I don't think you can freeze a human body for 48 hours.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's what they got to do it in enough time, right? Because freezing's lethal if only after a certain time. Once again, different universe. So they so anyway, just getting into, so we have like what I think is an interesting real pinnacle of this whole hey, we're the same thing, is where at this point Jack is noticing, of course, that the Joker medicine is wearing off and his Joker personality is coming back. There's some question as to, do they need the Joker personality to defeat this new Joker and all the stuff that she's doing? He pulls Bruce out of They put him in Arkham. They don't unmask him, but they put him in Arkham. He pulls him out, and probably one of my favorite panels, just for the dialogue. There's a lot of really good art in this, but just for the dialogue is when they're in the Batmobile together. And he's saying like, all right, are you going to keep the Joker at bay? And he turns and he's got the white makeup on and everything. And he's like, sorry to disappoint you, basically, but I'm already the Joker. And then he's like, Batman's, reacting. And anyway, so the line that I just love is when the Joker's just like, don't worry, our needs intersect on this one. Just think of me as one of your Robins.
Oof, man, that hurts, man. That hurt real bad. I got a big oof out of me. That of all the things he could have said, that's probably the worst thing he could have said, which is why he said it.
And I will say this is, and maybe they're better at the Joker personality in a way. Like you said, they had to bend Batman a little bit. But when he goes back to Joker, he's just awful. I mean, that's the thing. He really is. He's like, you want to save the city? I want to let her know what her teeth taste like, basically. Like shove her teeth down her throat. And it's like, well, Jack wouldn't have said that, I don't think.
That's kind of the feeling that I got with that line specifically. Like, after having had Jack for 80 pages or whatever it is, like that line right there is like,
it's like, he's back. This guy.
Calm down, fella.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So you have this real dichotomy, and now it's interesting. I'm curious about your thoughts about this. It crossed my mind. It's like, so you've got, Jack and Batman in the car together. like, okay, we're our interests align, and there's similarities between us. We've talked about that, right? Similarities about how they're both ego, but they're both like trying to do the wrong thing for the right reasons. Maybe Batman is, maybe he isn't, whatever. But then he changes to Joker, and now I'm like, okay, are we now seeing two people in the car who actually in some ways are more alike or less alike?
Hmm. Hmm. I think, I mean, once I would say that once he's back full Joker, that they're less alike. If it weren't for that last scene between Batman and Gordon, and this is what I really don't like, is Batman admitting that he enjoys beating the hell out of his criminals. Uh,
Yes.
that I think is completely out of Batman character. I don't think Batman has ever enjoyed it. I think that's a level of psychopath that he's never quite gotten to. Um, but since it is in there and it is part of the story, there is a good argument to be made that they may be more like, if you take that, I want to shove her teeth down her throat, and I enjoy beating people up senseless. They're right there. So
There is,
yeah,
there is. Well, and I'll say this though, and that didn't bother me if I'm in the what if mode. I think that generally speaking, I don't think that's usually how we see Batman, and I'm with you on that, but as far as in the what if mode, it was interesting to see. So what if, once again, if Batman really had gotten this carried away? So as we started earlier, we said he wasn't really wrong about the Joker, but
yeah.
he comes to realize through this that he's like, I've been doing this wrong for some amount of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we see this confrontation. I think, well, a couple of elements of it that I think are really interesting. As far as how the plot goes, he goes back. Jack Napier goes back to Arkham, and he becomes the Joker again. Has to be locked up. He volunteers while he's still Jack because he knows that it's coming.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, then yes, the main thing, you do get a couple of moments here where Batman talks to Dick and Barbara, and he tells him, they're like, "You all right?" And he's like, "I'm not all right. I'm never have been. I'm not going to be all right, but sorry that I hurt you." Sort of a thing. There's this kind of like,
Yeah.
it's a much better speech than that, but man, I was like, that's a cool, because you do see these cool Batman and Dick Grayson moments sprinkled throughout in the comics where they're at odds with each other, father son dynamic, and there are times where he opens up a little and says, "Yeah, I'm going to be a dad figure instead of just fighting with you,"
Right.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And there's
but then,
very much at odds throughout
yeah,
this entire series up
yeah.
until that moment with Dick and Barbara at the very end.
So that moment, and this is where it ends, is basically, and I'll be honest, I haven't read the next volume, so I don't really know where they take the story. Assuming that it just picks up where this leaves off. Um, which I'm assuming, I guess there is a volume 2, right? So anyway, he pulls off his cowl and he's like, I shouldn't be Batman anymore because I've gotten to where I like hurting people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an interesting thing. So, and it ends there. And I guess for me, I start thinking, like, what are they trying to say here? Like, is it presenting as if this was a real guy? It would be very difficult for him, not to cross that line. Or is this just sort of, once again, a, fairly obvious metaphor for authority and those that we trust becoming corrupted? Like is this just the police, for example, right? Is this a metaphor for that we can look and say, what would it take somebody who believes that they are in the right to say, which maybe that's generous to compare that to the police. But anyway, in certain circumstances, obviously that's not the case when you have people who are criminals, basically
Right.
that are whatever. But they do, that's woven through, because at one point Harvey Bullock tells Gordon, if that was a cop, you would have arrested him for assault,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not okay. And so anyway, so here he is saying, I just wonder if this is like an idea of, here's who we trust. And this is the main difference at the end between him and the Joker. Like you say, this puts them on a level playing field, except for remorse and trying to make amends.
Yeah. Yeah. I
To
think
me, that's
I
maybe the difference.
I 100% agree with that. And to Bruce taking off the cowl and finally revealing to Gordon who he is. And they had earlier set that up as, I don't even know who you are, man. And they kind of tread that in Batman too, Jeffrey Wright's Gordon. I don't even know who you are, man.
Yeah.
And I think once you've done what Batman's done long enough, maybe desensitized is the word. Like when your hands have been around so much filth for so long, they're gonna get filthy. And it took this event to make Bruce realize how desensitized he's become to things.
Yeah.
And that pulling off the cowl is kind of like an act of contrition. Like we need to have all cards on the table right now and have full trust if we are to continue how we have been continuing for all these years.
Yes. Absolutely. I agree. And I'll say this. So um, just like you're saying, so I like this. Yeah, I like this. It's a cool thought experiment. It's interesting, as a what if and all this. On the other hand, I don't like this very much. So, I mean, what I'm saying is if I really enjoyed this read and I would recommend it to anybody. But overall there is I don't want this to be like the main Batman. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I feel like they were doing a lot of weird stuff with Batman around this time, which is when I kind of was like, all right, you guys are doing too much. Because we had this White Knight coming out, and then we had like for some reason they thought making Batman like metal was going to be the cool thing. So then you got like Dark Knight's metal. That was its whole thing. And I'm like, they're trying to do too many takes on
Yeah.
just your classic refreshing Batman that I'm not feeling any of the extracurricular stuff. I thought this was good for a read. I don't think I'm suggesting it to anyone unless they've already touched all the you must read classics. Like if
This is
someone's like,
my
I've never
thought.
read,
Yeah.
yeah, I've never read Long Halloween. Should I read that or should I read White Knight? And I'm going to tell you to read Long Halloween.
It's like, well, and this is where my issue does come in with it. Is exactly what you're saying. I think that we already, like, if you want to make the boys, go make the boys, right? I've
Yeah.
had enough personally of like evil Superman. It's like make a different show about evil Superman. Homelander's that's got that covered. Invincible has that covered, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all those things. So you've got those kind of like alternate. I mean, Injustice, right? We did that already, so it's like, okay, I think that when you're absolutely right, if it's like you're going to read, it's like if you're going to start reading X-Men, don't start with like Old Man Logan. It's like it just doesn't have the power and even as a thought experiment, it doesn't have the weight if you don't really know the lore and the background. This is one, so I think that it doesn't get Batman, but it's not trying to either. It's trying to change Batman. So I think they
Right.
succeed at what they're trying to do in a good narrative way. But I'm with you in that, I really do think what we need a Batman who is, the logical detective. The Long Halloween Batman is a great, way to start that kind of thing. And so Year One also, a pretty good version of Batman. You go back and do that. So anyway, I'm with you on that. So this is a very interesting psychological thought experiment, but not the best Batman and not the one that we think of when we think of Batman. So there we go.
Yes, that's probably the best way to sum it up. Interesting, like if you're taking a shower, like what happened if you would do this with Batman? Or what I guess the
Exactly.
what if is what happens if Joker decides to try to do good. That's the what if in all of
So if
this.
you're
And
a
then,
Batman fan, I would say if you're a Batman fan or you have a pretty good feeling Batman, this is an interesting read. I wouldn't say that it's like, oh, it's my favorite Batman either, but it's a very interesting Batman. And I like the fact that they tried something. I like it when people try something. I mean, I
mhm.
don't think, I don't think I always have to agree with what they try and they executed it pretty well. So,
Yeah, I mean,
well,
just
all right,
because it's
man.
something different doesn't make it great.
Exactly. Hey, thank you
Yeah.
so much for joining me to talk some Batman.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate
Just
it. I'm
appreciate
always
it.
down to talk about the Batman.